pleasure to talk about Excaliver. The film is now about 20 years old, I think, maybe, but it's still just great. And I show it in classes often. High school, I would show it in college classes too, because it is a good way to learn about Arthurian legends. That is, King Arthur, Queen Guinevere, Lancelot, Gawain, Percival, all these guys, famous. The literature is great. The story is based on one work by Sir Thomas Malory. It was one of the first books published in England around 1460, when the first publisher, William Caxton, opened his publishing business. Malory was a strange man. I'll tell you a little about him because you should know. Malory was a lover of courtly romances, as they were called. Other names too, but courtly romances. This was mainly a French phenomenon, but French culture dominated Europe as it has so often. During the 12th and 13th centuries, the golden age of these long poetic stories written by various authors and sung and told by minstrels, troubadours, who would travel around singing by memory or from memory these many tales of Arthur and others. Now, 1460 is a late date to be appreciating such things. After all, they were out of fashion. But Malory apparently was imprisoned for some years, and near his prison, all this is conjecture, guess, near his prison was a famous monastery with a famous library, and that library contained all of the romances. Why should a monastic library contain those romances? That's an interesting question too. But anyway, so Malory must have read them all, and then he attempted to retell the story in some sequence and order, stories, compile, edit, and retell the stories in some kind of order. The order is not perfect, but the stories are so great. Now, Excaliver is an attempt to retell Malory in more orderly fashion, and it's a good attempt. I love it. By the way, the music to this movie is arguably the best ever in any movie. I can think of a couple of other that I would suggest a little better. But the music is mostly from Wagner's operas, and well done. And also Orff's Carmina Burana, which all Koreans know, though few Koreans seem to know what the name is. Dun 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 dun. This is Karl Orff, choral music, Carmina Burana of the 20th century. Okay. Main characters. At the beginning, England is in political turmoil, disorder. Two men are rivals to be King of England. One is Uther Pendragon. Uther is a wild guy, a warrior, a fighter, somewhat empty-headed. His rival is the Duke of Cornwall. And they are just about equal in power, and they have incessant battles and a lot of killing going on. Merlin, perhaps the main character in the whole movie, in the whole film, Merlin, the magician. Merlin is wonderful in this film because it's very clear, though somewhat subtle, I think. He represents pagan religion of nature. Christianity has arrived, and so the movie contains an interesting mixture and contest, almost undeclared contest, between paganism and Christianity. In this, the movie is an echo of Beowulf, the oldest classic of English literature, even though it's in Anglo-Saxon, very early English. By the way, Malory's book, 1460, belongs to Middle English. that is recognizably English. Beowulf is hard to see much English in, it's mostly Germanic. But in Beowulf we have the same tension between the pagan and the arriving Christianity, however crude, very crude it is. Okay, so at the beginning, Merlin, who is deathless, Merlin is like a force of nature. But Merlin's knowledge of things is imperfect, as you will see. He misses many things, and he's surprised, constantly surprised. And it's one of the great touches of the movie that he is so often surprised. I didn't foresee this, he says, time and time again, at wonderful times, unforgettable times. Okay, but Merlin nevertheless has been around a long time, is a very wise man, and has magical powers. To Merlin has come Excaliver, the sword of power, the sword of kings. And this sword has magical powers. It's indestructible, apparently. Whoever has Excaliver will be king of England. But that person has to be worthy of Excaliver. Anyway, so Merlin promises Excaliver to Uther Pendragon. And Uther and Duke of Cornwall meet one morning in the woods. Nature, beautiful spring it must be, like now. Beautiful surroundings. And Uther pulls out the sword. Behold, the sword of power, Excaliver, forever. He who holds it is king. Yield to me, Cornwall. And then Cornwall says, if I yield to the sword of power, what will you yield? I yield? Never! In typical Uther fashion. But Merlin says, he has given something, you must give something too, fool. He doesn't call him a fool, but he regards him as a fool, and he is a fool. Uther is a fool. Okay, if you yield to the sword of power, all the land from here to the coast of England shall be yours if you enforce the will of the king. Done! Then England has a king and the sword of power. Now let's go to Cornwall's castle, where we will celebrate this wonderful event. Okay, at Cornwall's castle, a feast, all men, mostly men, no women available, visible, except Cornwall's wife, Igraine. Igraine is young and beautiful. Cornwall is not so young. And so the men are feasting and drinking, of course, a lot, and the music is playing, and Cornwall signals to his wife to dance, to perform a dance. Well, his wife is a very sensual, very attractive woman, and she starts this dance. The men look at her mesmerized, hypnotized, and the pace of the music becomes faster and faster, and her pace of dancing becomes faster and faster, and more sensual, even sexual. And soon the men are pounding to the music, pounding on their tables with their knives, with their fists. Uther is ablaze, on fire with lust, must have her. And finally, when everything reaches its peak of tension, Uther slams the table and glares at Cornwall. Cornwall glares at him. Enough! They leave, and war. Of course, war. What is this war about? Uther must have Igraine. That's the kind of guy Uther is. Okay. Now, so finally Merlin reappears. Uther, impatient, says, always when I want you, I can't find you. And when I don't want you, then you appear. Merlin says, I've been around the world in this time. Promise me Igraine, says Uther. Let me have Igraine, use your magical powers, and I will give you anything you want. Okay. Merlin says, if I help you to Igraine's bed, I want the fruit of your intercourse. that is the baby. Done. Uther would promise anything. So Merlin then uses his magic incantation. It's beautiful, by the way. It's in Gaelic. That is the language of the Celts, pagan Celts, pre-Christian. It's beautiful, and it's used many times in the film. Something like that. It's wonderful. And suddenly, when he does this, he awakens the dragon. The dragon is some vast force under the earth that kind of is everything, is God, is everything. And mostly it sleeps. But when the natural laws are broken, violated, disrupted, it awakens. And Merlin has that power. So the dragon breathes its breath and fog everywhere. Everywhere. This will happen again later too. And then Merlin, Uther is on a hill over here, and here's the castle. And below, there's rock, an abyss kind of, and the fog is there. And Merlin then casts a spell on Uther and says, "Ride, ride, your lust will keep you up in the fog." And so Uther's afraid, but okay, Merlin says. So he rides across this area on the fog, on his lust, and in the process, he is physically changed. Uther comes to identify, look just like Igraine's husband, the Duke of Cornwall. Meanwhile, before this actually, Merlin has arranged to lead Cornwall out of the castle on a night raid with some soldiers, 20 soldiers, 30. There will be a fight at night. Now, all this Merlin at work. Uther arrives at the castle door. The guards see the Duke of Cornwall. The Duke is back. Let him in, let him in. Everybody's, your grace, because they think Uther is Cornwall. Igraine is with her daughter, the very important Morgana. Morgana is one of the most important characters in the film. Or Morgana then is the daughter of Cornwall and Igraine, the legitimate daughter. And she is fascinated by Merlin every time she sees Merlin, and she is fascinated by magic and all that. So she has woken up during the night with having a bad dream, Morgana. And Igraine, good mother, is comforting her. "No, there's nothing wrong. I think something is happening to father, something terrible." "No." And just then Uther appears. "Look, here's father." Now, Morgana is sharp, but she can't see through this. And so Uther takes off his helmet, looking just like Cornwall, and says, "Come, Igraine, get rid of Morgana there." So the girl is sent away, and we have a sex scene, really. It's not bad. It's pretty tastefully done. But this is very important because this is the begetting of Arthur. King Arthur. Because these two, from their union, which is an illegitimate, illegal union, notice, out of wedlock, will come Arthur. Now, just when this is happening, Cornwall falls from his horse out there in the woods in his battle, falls on a spike. He's dead. He's very dead. So just when Arthur is being begotten, is being formed, let's say, the father dies. Well, this is going to add some legitimacy because later Igraine and Uther will get married. So Igraine is pregnant now. The wars are over, and Cornwall is dead, and Uther has moved in and taken over the castle, everything. At the end of 9 months, Igraine has her baby, and Uther is touched by this. I guess he never had a child before, and he thinks, this beautiful baby, now I'm going to be a man of peace. Now I'm going to be a husband and a father. I'm so tired of killing. Killing is all I have known. Suddenly enter Merlin. Oh no. Now Uther remembers his promise, the promise that he made in his lust. And Merlin says, You stole the Duke's wife. You stole the Duke's castle. Now no one trusts you. And now you will lose Excaliber too. You'll lose everything. Give me the child. I will take care of the child. You promised. You promised by Excaliber. You swore. Igraine screaming, What is this? What? You are the father of the child then. You, Uther. But you look just like my husband. She's puzzled and she's heartbroken, but Uther must give the child, Arthur, to Merlin. And Merlin leaves with the child. Some exchange with Morgana on the way out, because Morgana now sees what kind of power she wants, but now her father is dead. And she now realizes that she hates Arthur. Her life's mission will be to try to cause suffering to Arthur. It's very similar really to Hera, Queen of the Gods, and her kind of life mission in literature to torment Heracles, Hercules. But the outcome is very much the same, and this parallel is important. The point is that the sufferings that Morgana causes to Arthur and to Camelot and the knights are also a source of its greatness. Just like the sufferings that Heracles endures because of Hera are the very source of his greatness. And so we have a kind of profound view here of the role of suffering in life. Of course, it's not all redemptive or not all even edifying, but some of it is, and that's the theory here. And that's the best human beings can do, it seems. Anyway, very interesting parallel. So, Merlin then gives the child to Sir Ector, who already has a son named Sir Kay. And Arthur grows up as Kay's brother. And Kay doesn't know that Arthur is not his brother. No one knows except Ector and Merlin, of course. And they grow up. Then, meanwhile, after Arthur is taken away from Uther, Uther is riding out in the woods and he's attacked. Merlin was right. No one trusts him anymore. They attack him, they pursue him, and they try to kill him. But just before he dies, mortally wounded, he finds a big stone as he's struggling through the woods, mortally wounded, as I say. And he takes Excaliber, and he puts Excaliber in this big, large stone, saying, only the person who can draw the sword out of the stone can be the king. Years pass. Many try to pull the sword out of the stone. No one is successful. Everyone realizes that magical powers are at work here, especially through Merlin, of course. Years pass. Now Arthur has grown up a little bit. He's 18, maybe? 17 or 18. He's the squire of Kay and Ector. And Kay and Ector do what knights do. They go to tournaments, and they fight in tournaments. This is a brutal sport, since people could be killed. Even more brutal than American football, perhaps. But these are skilled fighters. So, Arthur's job is to make sure the horse is ready, the weapons are ready, everything, the equipment is ready, everything. Armor. Just as Kay and Ector are about to enter the fight, Kay says, "Oh, where's my sword? Arthur, where's Kay's sword? I must have left it in the room where we were staying." So Arthur runs to find it. Now, most people are out there looking at the tournament, watching the tournament. So Arthur goes one place to the room, but it's not there. And just then he sees a little boy, mysterious little boy, disappearing around the corner, apparently holding the sword. Merlin at work. And Arthur pursues, and he passes a corner and he follows the boy, just barely seeing him, out into the woods. And he's in a clearing in the woods, and what can he do? Kay needs a sword. And he turns around, and here's the sword in the stone. And Arthur thinks, I'll take this sword to Kay. And so, out comes the sword. Arthur is the next king. But he doesn't know any of this, really. He's kind of an innocent fool. Just then, Ector and Kay, along with others, arrive, and they, what? Arthur, did you pull the sword out of the stone? No. He's embarrassed. Yes. Give me the sword, says Kay. Now others arrive. Kay, did you pull the sword out of the stone? Yes. No. Arthur did. But Arthur's not even a knight. He's a squire. And so the big knights are enraged at this. They had never been able to pull the sword out of the stone, and this boy, this obscure boy, pulls the sword out of the stone. Put it back. He puts it back. Then a couple of the main Urians, whom I love, a wonderful knight, Sir Urians, tries to pull it out. It won't come out. Another of the knights tries to pull it out. It won't come out. Arthur, try again. Out. He must be king. Urian says, no, I will not accept a boy squire as my king. He's not even a knight. Who's with me? Many follow Urians, and some, including what's his name on the screen? Anyway, one important knight says, no, I will be loyal to Arthur. If Arthur pulled the sword out of the stone, then Arthur is the king. So now a new war. And our next then follows an interesting sequence when Arthur runs into the woods. He's frantic. It kind of symbolizes, it's an allegory of his confused condition, running through the woods kind of blindly, with Excaliver though. When he arrives deep in the woods, there's Merlin, sleeping by a little fire. And he spends some time, a day, more, with Merlin. He's not even aware of time, and it's all very symbolic. But Merlin basically schools him. You're the king. I don't know how to be a king. You knew how to pull the sword out of the stone. I couldn't do that, says Merlin. Yes, but what do kings do? You will learn. And then he faces some terrible snakes and scorpions and things at night, symbolizing fear, because Merlin tries to help him overcome his fears. And the next morning, Arthur surprises Merlin, not for the first time, and many times will follow, when he says, Excaliver is part of the dragon too. It must be. Oh, you're very good, says Merlin. Clever. You will be a good king. What is happening back there now? Well, I think probably a war is happening. And they are waiting for you. You're their king. What should I do? Go lead them. How? Take Excaliber and go. So Arthur arrives, and they are there waiting for him. Some, including Ector and Kay, and some others. Whoever wants to follow a king, follow me. We are going to the castle of whatever the man's name is. He's the father of Guinevere, because that castle is under siege by your Urians and the other knights. So Arthur arrives. A battle is going on. The ladders climbing the very tall walls, soldiers, scaffolds allowing soldiers to go up and leap into the castle, fire, arrows, fighting, and Arthur, no armor, but with Excaliber. Merlin is there, though, to give him some good ideas. And so, first thing he does is take a rope up the scaffolding. The rope has a hook at the end of it. And Merlin attaches the rope to two very powerful horses. And after this is done, Arthur hops off of there, and Merlin whispers in the ear of the horses, his magical stuff, the horses are startled and pull with great power. Down comes the scaffolding, killing some of the bad warriors. Of course, they're not really bad. They just have to die in the economy of things. Arthur's using his sword, defeating men right and left. He arrives near the top, and Guinevere, wonderful Guinevere, the daughter of this owner of the castle, this actually he's called a king, says, "Look, it's the boy king." No, Guinevere doesn't say it, her father says it. And Guinevere is charmed and attracted as the boy king climbs up and does remarkable things. Finally, the boy king reaches the walls. There are already some bad soldiers up there fighting on the walls, and he starts killing a few of them. One man wounds him badly, I think on the hand, but Arthur really kills him. And then comes one of the first really great dramatic moment of the film, I would say. Picture Arthur high on a wall. Down below, there's like a body of water, a small lake, a pond, really. And soldiers are in there, in the water, some on horse, and lots of fighting going on. Arthur jumps down. It's a far drop. I would guess 20 meters, maybe. 15 to 20 meters, pretty high, as tall as that building across the street from my house. And in falling, he lands on or right next to Uriens, who's the leader of the opposition here, knocking him down into the water, landing himself in the water too, so he's not hurt, and Uriens isn't hurt either. Uriens is on his knees now in the water. The water is not deep, and Arthur holds his sword to his throat and says, "Yield to me. Yield to Excaliver." Dramatic. It's a great moment. Silence, and everyone stands around to watch what will happen in this amazing event. And Urien says, "I, a knight, yield to a squire? Never!" And a few of his supporters agree, "Never! Never!" So, Arthur has his first really great idea. He says, "You're right. I'm only a squire. You, Uriens, will knight me." Wow! Merlin steps out of eternity and says, "What? I didn't foresee this. I didn't know this." It's one of those great times when Merlin is surprised. Anyway, and so then Urien stands up, Arthur kneels, Uriens now has the sword, and a couple of his followers say, "Kill him! Kill the boy!" And Uriens would like to, and keep the sword and be the king. But he's overwhelmed, I think, by supernatural influence, really. Call it grace in Christian terms. And he says, "In the name of God, Saint Michael, and Saint George, I make you a knight. Rise. Rise, King Arthur." The courage in your veins is so great, you must be the son of Uther Pendragon. Great. Great moment. Okay. So, then we get the celebration. Guinevere sews up the wounds, S-E-W-S, sews up the wound of Arthur. Arthur is totally smitten, totally in love with her. And she's pretty much in love with him too. Then we get a feast, lots of drinking and dancing. And Guinevere is a sensual woman. She loves to be thrown around by the big husky knights and all that. Arthur tries, but his wound was in his side, I guess. In his side. Christ-like. And soon he aggravates the wound and must sit down. And he talks with Merlin and he says, "Merlin, I must have her. I hope she'll be my queen." help me to win her. And Merlin wittily says, I did this once before with your father Uther. Never again. It took me a long time to recover from that. Never. This stupid thing called love. This rolling around on beds and crazy behavior. Dr. Shin. So, comical, wonderful. Soon, let's see now, what's next? Must be that now Arthur is the king. Everyone recognizes him, but there are still some pockets of resistance. So now Arthur leads his forces with lots of soldiers, and soon all the resistance is gone, and the land is united under one king and Excaliber. And Arthur announces that he will build a castle, Camelot. And in this castle there will be a large room with a round table to emphasize equality or something like it of the knights. And high standards, the highest standards of chivalry will permeate Camelot and permeate the land. And the land will have peace and prosperity. All this, he hopes, will happen. And it will happen. Then, one day, Arthur and his soldiers and his knights are traveling somewhere. And they reach a point, and there's a mysterious knight there, and the knight refuses to let anyone pass. This is a typical of adventures of the chivalry romances, courtly romances, chivalry romances, all the same. This knight is Lancelot. And he refuses to let anyone pass unless that person can defeat him in combat. Now, this is not to the death. This is just a knightly scrimmage. And one by one, all the knights come back. Oh, he is tough. Wow, this is terrible. Oh. And Arthur says, this is ridiculous. I'm going to go fight him. No, you can't do that. You're the king. And Arthur, angry, and his anger is going to get him into trouble again and again. Now we get this key, wonderful moment. So Arthur approaches this mysterious knight. Let me by. I'm the king. Only if you defeat me in combat. This is Excaliver, the sword of kings. I don't care. Only if you defeat me in combat. Okay, then so be it. Well, they do their knightly jousting thing, and twice, I think, Arthur is on the ground. Clearly, Arthur is a great fighter, but this is Lancelot, greatest of all knights, from France, as we will learn. And then Arthur says, okay, you won at jousting, now we pass to sword. Once again, Lancelot gets the better of him again and again. And Arthur then is just enraged, and he says, to the death. This is crazy, says Lancelot. This is just a match between knights. To the death. What can Lancelot do? So now the fighting gets very serious. And at a certain point, Arthur is down, of course, and he reaches for Excaliber. Water is nearby. Lancelot could easily kill him. This scene is in slow motion, too. Very interesting. And our big moment. Arthur reaches for the sword and he says, Excaliber, I call upon your powers. Mystery music, mystery sounds. Lancelot, stunned, holds out his whatever that he's defending himself with. And Excaliber, of course, cuts into it and breaks it. And Lancelot is apparently wounded. But, more important, Excaliber breaks. Merlin is there, of course. That's impossible. You have broken that which could not be broken. No, Arthur says that. No, Merlin says, what have you done? I don't know. My rage got the better of me. My pride. This excellent knight who fought with grace and courtesy, while I fought unfairly, who could have killed me easily many times and didn't, I have defeated by calling on Excaliver for the wrong reasons. I'm disgraced, I'm humiliated, I'm unworthy of Excaliver. I begin to see that these mysterious times, because once again Merlin is amazed. He doesn't understand this. I think what these mysterious times are times when Christian values emerge. And Merlin, of course, is surprised sometimes by these. Then we get the mysterious music, and out of the water appears the hand of the Lady of the Lake, because it was she who had given the sword to Merlin in the first place. The mysterious Lady of the Lake, who was somehow a pagan power, and she's holding Excaliver. She has mended Excaliver. It's whole again. Take it, says Merlin to Arthur. Arthur, terrified but amazed, timidly goes over in the water. Wow. So many great moments. Looks at her, makes eye contact with her. She's lying in the water, but she's a goddess. And he takes the sword. Lancelot returns to his senses, recovers his senses. Lancelot is happy because now Lancelot, it seems Lancelot from France was a tormented man. He could not find rest until he found a king who was worthy of him. Now all this is some kind of knightly nonsense, but anyway, it's still in his life it's powerful. And he's happy because now he has found the king whom he will serve. And he will give his life for Arthur. He will be Arthur's champion. He's happy. The friendship between them is tremendous. It's a wonderful moment. But the next step on the road of drama here is that Arthur is going to get married. And he's going to marry Guinevere. And he sends Lancelot. He can't go to fetch Guinevere from her castle far away. So he sends Lancelot and some others to fetch Guinevere and her maids of honor and all the company and bring them back to Camelot. By the way, Morgana, now fully grown, a beautiful woman, of course, lives at Camelot too. And she's always looking for trouble. And she's always pestering Merlin for magical knowledge, supernatural knowledge and powers. Anyway, Lancelot goes to fetch Guinevere. And an important moment comes when he arrives. Her father says, Guinevere, come. Lancelot is here to take you to get married. And she appears. Eye contact between Guinevere and Lancelot. Explosion. Le coup de foudre is the great French expression. The bolt of lightning. Love at first sight. Boom. Powerful. He understands it more than she does, I think. After all, she's about to get married. Then we get the trip back to Camelot. The maids all admire Lancelot. He's so handsome. He's so impressive. They're giggling and telling jokes and all that. And finally, Guinevere breaks away from them and rides on her horse up to ride next to Lancelot. And they're riding along. And she says, playfully apparently, when are you going to get married? Do you have a lover or a lady to whom you're devoted? And when will you marry her? I will never marry because there's only one woman I love in this world, and that will never change. And who is that? Says Guinevere. You. Well, if she didn't love him before, she does now. It's a terrible thing because, of course, this means even before they are married, we have mischief, trouble, a great source of confusion, a great source of temptation, a great source of folly. And here it is. So then we get the wedding ceremony, and the ceremony is a Christian ceremony. Apparently, a bishop or an archbishop, of course, probably archbishop, conducting it. Merlin off to the side, not taking part in this, and Morgana with him. And Morgana asks him for knowledge, and Merlin has feelings for Morgana, and he does give her powers. Little by little, he's going to teach her. Try to teach her carefully, but maybe not. Meanwhile, the court life continues, but and this is a big point in Mallory's book. Where there is peace, there are vices and problems. Peace and prosperity produce mischief, and the history of mankind pretty much demonstrates this too. It's one reason why morally, I suppose, we need wars and crises, because lacking wars and crises, we've become these frivolous, hedonistic, bored creatures that we are much of the time. Anyway, so more and more Lancelot avoids the court, avoids Camelot. Everyone wants to know why. He knows why, and I think Arthur in his heart knows why, and Guinevere certainly knows why. And it's to avoid temptation. He can't stand to be near Guinevere because he is totally in love with her, and he's afraid of himself. He's afraid of her too, probably. And I think Arthur understands it, but he pretends not to. Then Morgana at work, whispering. And Morgana whispers in Sir Gawaine's ear. Now, Gawain is not important in Excaliber, though Gawain is very important in Mallory's book. I taught college courses on Mallory's book twice, so I got to read it through twice. It consists of 2 volumes, a total of about 1,400 pages, significant length, but wonderful. A real classic, adventure classic, with some deep moments too, and very moving. Anyway, so Morgana whispers in Gawaine's ear as they're sitting around the table, feasting, everybody drinking a lot. Meanwhile, Arthur says, Merlin, we seem to have achieved total peace and prosperity here. Is this one of the great moments in the history of the world? Or are we deceiving ourselves? And Merlin says, well, at such times beware of temptations and beware of mischief. What is the single most important virtue, the single most important virtue in a knight? And Merlin thinks for a moment and he says, truthfulness. Without truthfulness, we have only lies. Truthfulness. Then, Gawain suddenly speaks in his drunkenness. Why is he never here? He's our greatest knight. Talking about Lancelot, of course. He's our greatest knight, and yet he's never here. I think I know why. Why? Speak, Gawain, says Arthur, disingenuously. That is, I think Arthur knows perfectly well what Gawain's going to say, and because Arthur knows perfectly well why Lancelot isn't there. But he plays the fool. It's a woman's lust. He says, looking straight at the queen. What? Says Arthur, springing to his feet. Why, you dare say this? Someone has to challenge Gawain. I, the king, can't challenge him because I'm the judge. I have to be the judge. I'm the king. That's my responsibility. In 3 days' time, at dawn, a champion of Guinevere must appear to defend her honor against this attack. And God will be the judge of whether Gawain is right and the queen is guilty of lust, at least, or Gawain is wrong and Guinevere is innocent. on that third morning, still none of the knights will appear. None of the knights will fight Gawain, which means that all of them agree that that Guinevere is guilty. Then the king, Arthur, says, will no one defend the queen? He says, very moved and disappointed, of course. And she is disappointed that he, her husband, won't defend her. But his holding to the ideals and laws of the kingdom is more important to him. So this makes her feel like she's secondary in his life. And I suppose, in a way, it's true. They have no children. They never produce children. Anyway, so just then, a squire named Percival says, I will defend the queen. You're not even a knight. And then Arthur says, come, I will knight you. So Arthur knights Percival. Now I've got to go back and explain something that I missed. Percival, who is this boy? He was the innocent fool. Lancelot, in his vast travels one day, was riding through the woods in his shining armor on his white horse, and a boy in the woods, whose origins are perhaps very high, but who lives a primitive life in the woods, sees Lancelot, and he is sure that this must be an angel, God's angel. And he waits for Lancelot to get off his horse and lie down and sleep. And then he approaches the sleeping Lancelot. Lancelot sitting kind of against a tree, but still with his armor on. And just as he gets very near, Lancelot, sword out. Well, the boy is just amazed. Go away, boy. The boy is just amazed. He has had an epiphany. This is an epiphany for him, an experience of God or godliness. And so he catches a rabbit and leaves the rabbit for Lancelot to eat. And Lancelot is pleased, but Lancelot is amused by this boy. And Percival approaches him and says, make me a knight. I can't make you a knight, but if you want, you can follow me to Camelot, where you can be a squire and you can learn about knighthood. How far is it? 21 days' ride. I will follow you on foot. And so Percival runs for 21 days following Lancelot back to Camelot. And Lancelot is amused by Percival, but Percival idealizes Lancelot. By the way, Gawain also idealizes Lancelot, and it pains him that Lancelot is not around at Camelot. And when he hears from Morgana what the cause is, he believes it. Both of these men, in fact, most of the men in Camelot idealize Lancelot. He is the perfect knight. But he has this terrible flaw, this love, this itching love that he feels for Guinevere. Okay, so when Lancelot and Percival, arrive at the castle at Camelot, Lancelot says, Kay, Sir Kay, here's a new squire. Squires were badly treated. Squires were often treated like slaves. Long hours of menial labor, relatively little training in arms. It was just cheap labor, really. And so that's who Percival has been now for a while, a few months anyway. And now this boy, Percival, has agreed, with very little training, to stand up against one of the greatest knights, Gawain, to defend the honor of the queen. But for him, he's mainly defending the honor of Lancelot. And he would die for Lancelot without any hesitation at all, one thinks. So, no armor, hops on a horse lightly, is given the jousting instrument, and the combat is about to begin when it's Lancelot. It's Lancelot! Lancelot comes riding out of the woods. Now, Lancelot, in his dreams last night, dreamed that he was wrestling another knight who was just like himself. And in that dream, somehow, he fell upon or was wounded in the side. And this wound is going to stay with him the rest of his life. And he will eventually die from it, and he almost dies a couple of times from it. And that wound basically represents his love of Guinevere. So that wound is kind of fresh. And he rides in, he's weakened by loss of blood too. And he rides up to Percival, and Percival feels a little dishonored. I don't know. I mean, here he was. But Lancelot speaks to him really kind of like a father. A mentor, certainly, and he says, "Sorry, Percival, but this has to be my fight." And Percival knows he's right, of course. So Lancelot turns around, we have the battle. And it's a rough one. And soon Lancelot is bleeding profusely. And a couple of times Gawain could have killed him probably, but he's afraid of Lancelot. And Lancelot's so quick and so powerful in spurts. So in one amazing move, he flips Gawain, and Gawain is down, and he's holding a sword to Gawain's throat. And Gawain says, "Spare me." "The queen is innocent," he says. Really, this is the only way he can save his own life. "The queen is innocent." Guinevere greatly relieved. Arthur greatly relieved. And then a kind of strange moment. Eerie music, and Lancelot really wants to kill Gawain, even though Gawain has yielded here. It would have been a pretty bad thing to do. But he's enraged that he's almost killed himself, all of this, but he really knows that he is the source of the problem. He is the problem. It's not Gawain. The problem is not Gawain. The problem is not Morgana. He is the problem. Now he's lost a lot of blood and he collapses. Now he is in bed, and Arthur and Guinevere are begging Merlin to save his life. And it looks like Lancelot will die. And finally, though, Arthur says, "Call upon the forces of the dragon, Excaliver, anything. Save him." And so Merlin does this, calls on the special magical forces to save Lancelot's life. And suddenly, only Gawain is with him. Only Guinevere is with him. He's bare. He has no shirt on. And suddenly he sits up, and here is Guinevere right there. They don't kiss or anything, but the emotion between them is electric. It's very powerful. Now starts the long decline. Really, where did it start? It started when Gawain said what he said. The long decline. They fall into disarray, confusion, decadence. But really, the decadence began almost when the victory and peace and Camelot were built. Decadence began even before the wedding. That is, when peace is established and some sign of prosperity, there's where decadence will begin. Okay, so then Lancelot rides out all the time, seldom comes back. And one time, Guinevere rides out. Lancelot is standing up on the wall. He can see kind of magically. Merlin shows him, and she's riding. She's going to find Lancelot. Lancelot is sleeping. She comes, gets off her horse, runs to him. He tries to hold up a sword even. He tries to keep her from attacking him sexually, really. But she can't. He can't hit her. He can't stab her. And soon he's disarmed, and they're kissing. And they're kissing passionately. They spend the night together. Arthur, back on the walls of Camelot, knows what's happening. What can he do? What should he do? Should he kill Lancelot? Should he kill Guinevere? The two people who mean most to him in life, except for Merlin, who is more than human. What can he do? He's tormented. And he rides out. Meanwhile, Morgana is with Merlin and these two events happen at the same time. Morgana and Merlin go down into the underworld level below Camelot, an area of magical forces. Meanwhile, Arthur has ridden out and approaches the sleeping Lancelot and Guinevere. And magical music, terrible things are happening here, because at the same time, Morgana is basically capturing Merlin and imprisoning him in kind of like a pillar of ice. He's not going to die, but he's kind of going to just sleep for years, for many years. 10 or 15, in fact, years will pass. Meanwhile, Arthur sees the naked bodies of the two lovers. What can he do? He takes Excaliber and drives it into the earth. Now, into the earth means into the dragon. And into the dragon, we see an image of the sword actually going through Merlin. Through Merlin. So Merlin is eliminated. Excaliber is apparently eliminated. And now we have Arthur, the king. Lancelot can never go back to Camelot again. I'll summarize quickly here because it's a perfect place to break. It's the halfway point, actually, of the film. Or maybe a little more than half, I guess. Anyway, Merlin is gone. His help to Arthur, gone. Arthur becomes sick, and he will be sick for many years. It's a kind of psychological weariness, no energy, feels like he's dying all the time. The land becomes sick. The land becomes a wasteland. And this is where T.S. Eliot took his poem from the Arthurian legends of Wasteland. When the land without a king, the king without a land. The land doesn't grow any food, a famine occurs. Before this happens, before this happened, Arthur is sleeping in his bed, alone of course. Guinevere has disappeared. Morgana goes to him as Guinevere. She has these magical powers now, and seduces him. He makes love to her, and then at the very end, she reappears as herself. Thanks, brother. I'm going to produce a king who will be greater than you and who will kill you. And she goes away, sure that she is pregnant by her own half-brother. Terrible things will happen there. Merlin, gone. Now, Guinevere will enter a convent, become a nun. A big surprise later, I won't tell you the surprise. Lancelot will become a hermit, and eventually in the movie lead a kind of popular uprising against Arthur. It's a terrible thing, but general confusion, poverty, and disarray in the kingdom. Perfect time.